Hello, everybody, and welcome to Let's Fix Stories, the podcast where we take the stories you submit to us and we sit down with the writers and we go over what's working, what's not working, and how to make it the best that it can be. So, today we have a special guest. We have Sunny with us today, and we are going over her story, Future's Choice. So, we're going to start off with asking you, tell us a little bit about yourself, tell us a little bit about how your story came to be, and we'll start there.
Sunny or Sophie. I'm from Germany. Don't ask me about my age. I can't remember.
Fair enough.
I am too old to be still working on my debut novel. Let's go with that.
Never too old.
That's true. Never too old. And I'm working on Future's Choice. I'm using notebooks for everything. It's really helpful. And this book has changed a lot throughout the whole time. It started off as a completely different thing with more like action type of storyline. And then I worked on the world building, and I love working with other people, like telling them about the story that I'm working on, because they can give me input. They can ask me questions that I haven't thought about, and just based on the answer that I will most likely have to come up in the second, because like they're asking a question, I don't want to like have to come back to them in like a couple of days or months. I want to answer in that moment. The world building gets more kind of raw, I guess. And when I had this story built, I knew my main character to go into one direction, but I hadn't figured out that there is a whole spectrum of like careers that I hadn't thought about. It was either you do school or you do trade school, but there's a whole lot that isn't in there, like cooking or working in a supermarket or farming. And my friend was like, "What about those jobs?" And I'm like, "You're right." And that changed everything. It didn't just change the world building, it changed the plot.
Mm.
And for me, that's like, damn. And if I wouldn't have heard about it, the story would not have ended up this way, and maybe wouldn't have been that good. Because the world building would have had a big ass plot in it. Like, I wouldn't have thought about that, obviously.
So, why this story? What made you want to write this one specifically? And who is this book for? Like, who would you say the demographic would be?
I have a lot of different like stories, and I keep switching back and forth. But I'm like very close to finishing university right now, and I knew quite early that I didn't want to do uni anymore. But it was kind of like okay, now you started, now you don't want to stop in the middle of it, and not fully on my side, but like also from outside sources being very pushy on finishing university. And with this story, it's very much like you follow what you want to do. You do your thing, and with that, see what works for you. As in, her parents are teachers and want her to become a teacher too. So they want her to go into like a college type of later school. She wants to go into security, like become a bodyguard or something along those lines, which is like not something parents want to do. And then throughout the story, she's like, maybe it's not what I want to do, and kind of gets between the crossfires of her career and then finds something that works for her. So it's maybe more for the younger readers. And I feel like a lot of people nowadays, and I see it in myself and I see it in general very much on YouTube, a lot of people are pushed to uni. It's not just it's not just a US thing. It's also like something that I see in Germany or in England. Everyone is like, you have to go to university once you're done with school. But not everyone is made for university. Not everyone needs to go into a profession where you need to do university. It's a lot of money that gets thrown out the window for you just aging but not really gaining like experience in life. I wanted to also kind of write this for dear old me back when I started university.
Yeah.
So in essence it's for you. You wrote this for you, and for people who have similar experiences to you do. So I would say, new adult, young adult area audience. Okay, awesome. Okay, that's helpful.
Like 16, 17, so that also works well.
Gotcha. Okay. So here's a question: what part of your story, or what's a part of your story that keeps you up at night that you're just struggling to figure out and haven't been able to do?
Emotion, but that's a general problem that I have with writing. I have such a hard time writing down how someone feels. I usually tend to do more of the tell instead of the show.
Mhm.
I have aphantasia, so I can't actually. I don't have pictures in my head.
Mhm.
But at the same time, unless I'm actually hurt, I cannot tell you what type of pain someone experiences in that point of hurt. But even then, I can only be, well, it hurts.
Mm.
What else do you want me to tell you?
That's fair.
If I go to the doctor and they go, okay, from like a scale of 1 to 10, how much does it hurt? Well, currently it's a 10 because there's nothing I can compare it to.
That is a very interesting. I give you so much credit for so many reasons writing this story, but that is one that I want to commend you especially for, because being able to write without having access to those kind of little cheats that most writers do have is very impressive. And also, I think that the story that you share with us is very special because you have to work so hard to tell it in the way that you can.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And it's the whole you hear it a lot, the show don't tell thing, and people say it a lot, and it's like one of the golden rules of writing. But I feel like it's also one of the trickiest ones for people to get, even people who don't necessarily have struggle with what you're speaking about. I think just the average person sometimes does, because I think we are so used to just like explaining to people in everyday conversation. Like if I'm telling, like you just said, like if someone asks you what does it hurt, it just hurts. You don't sit there and tell them, my arm is swelling with the heat of, nobody talks like that. So when you're writing a story, it doesn't come naturally to us to do that. So I definitely get that, and I can see where that would be a struggle for a person. Is there anywhere else that you feel stuck or uncertain about in the story?
Well, ironically, because I did my calculations wrong, I'm actually almost done with the zero draft.
There
Okay,
you go.
nice,
There
very
you
nice.
go. Round of applause.
I put the goal down as 60,000,
Mhm.
which is like, that's a good goal for like the final draft, not the zero draft, for like a short chapter is much shorter. After the rough goal to 25K, it suddenly was like, you're not 25% into the book, you're 70% into the book.
So here's a question too I have for you. If what happens if you don't finish the book? How do you feel like that would impact you if you weren't able to finish it?
Well, I'm hoping I'm not gonna get to that point, but either way, I'm gonna be proud with how far I've gotten.
Mhm.
Before that, I've tried a lot of different stories. I've started a lot of stories, and then I got stuck at the beginning of the book.
Mhm.
And then because I got stuck, instead of thinking about, okay, what should happen next, I went back to the start and rewrote the whole thing that I already had. And it was like, there is a word in German, but I forgot the English word, was like a circle, a devil's circle, if I could translate the German.
Yeah, no, I like Devil's Circle so much better. I think the term you're looking for is vicious cycle, but Devil's Circle is so much better. I'm using that.
I like that.
It's just so stuck, and so either way, I'm so proud to making. I think I'm in chapter 16 right now, and
Okay.
previously I got to like chapter 3 at a maximum, and I got stuck in chapter 3 at the beginning. So to get this far in writing and have like I have my walls covered for this book.
Wow. Nice.
and
Love the dedication.
and this is my first time using this type of notebook where like my world building is in it, my characters are in it, I have headcanons for the characters as in like actual actors. I feel like that helps a lot as well, because like I see those actors sometimes accidentally on social media, and that also sometimes helps to think about the story in a different way.
That's a really great tip. That's like for those of us with creative ADHD, that's a lot of us. But
Yeah.
choosing, like, having something that you're gonna have right in front of you all the time that reminds you to go back and keep working on what you started, because for real, having that sense of accomplishment is so important. And also, when a story needs to be told, it's going to stick with you until it gets told. So being able to finally get all of that out and complete the story that you were telling yourself to heal parts of yourself that were younger that needed to hear these truths is really great.
Very true. I agree with that completely. I think yeah, it's exactly that. Also, I think it's also a really cool thing to be able to look back and say, this is the furthest I've gone so far. And this was all just ironically enough, this was just a part of your brilliant arc. This is your arc. It's just a part of your story, and so you're going a little bit further every single time. So I'm excited for you. That's fantastic. So before we jump into like the feedback part of the show, why don't you give us a quick version for the audience of what the story's about, the genre, the premise, the protagonist, all of that. Whatever you have available that you want to share with the audience.
I can try, but I'm undiagnosed ADHD, so I could possibly end up.
No problem. Go for it.
Just wave your hands when I'm going too far into possible. So it's a social. I think it's called social science fiction. So it does take place in like a futuristic London, in a more of a utopian world, but it is very much of like a social construct where it talks about like society. In this case, on how I feel like society would be improved as like what it could look like to be actually a good society, specifically in this instance for the younger people. Um, it's about a young girl called Isabel. And basically, how the world works is that from the age of 6 until 16, you do 50% of your day you spend in school, and the other half of the day you spend in something that I decided to call academy. I might still change that because most people, when thinking about academy, think about something that works exactly the same as school, but it's more like a trade school. But I don't like the word trade school because then again you have school and school. And I kind of want to have opposite words. So I'm in my next draft, maybe I can find a different word, especially because it's not really the focal point anymore, since the whole world building has changed. Before that, the academy was a much more important factor of the whole thing. And once you turn 16, you have your final day of both 50-50, and then you have 3 months where you do internships in different places. You have to do a minimum of 5 internships. Of course, you can do more if you want to. Minimum. And then you have your graduation, and then during your graduation, where like everyone walks past and gets their like diploma or like the graduation paper handed out, they then announce what career they want to go into. And we have Isabel, who is still 16. Well, I'm currently writing her birthday, but she is at the beginning still 16. And her parents are teachers, so of course they wanted to go into teaching as well. So that would be something where you would 100% do only school. She, however, is very set on doing security and possibly going into, for example, politics security. So in this instance, she does an internship at the mayor's place because she is friends with the mayor's child. You know, sometimes you have to use your nepotism a little bit. It's an internship. And that would then 100% be academy. And then throughout the book, she's like, okay, what if this isn't for me? What do I do? And throughout the book, she also moves out from her parents' place and moves in with her best friend, Sarah. And yeah, it's queer. It's very found family because the parents are very much like, you have to stay in the school, you have to become a teacher, and if you don't do teacher, maybe do something in law or something, like very much stick to the school route instead of the academy route. And moving out kind of helps her, and her parents are also accidental homophobes. Love it. And it's like a little bit of generational trauma as well, because the parents also come from families where they also heard like you have to become a teacher, and teacher is the only route. So it is generational trauma, just in a different way than what we normally think about. Because usually it's more of okay, you come from, like, for example, from a war period, or a period where like you had to ration a lot of food, and so that kind of moves down to families to also then having to ration food, because you're always worried that, for example, the food could come low. But I think it still counts as generational trauma, even if it's technically just forcing your child into becoming a profession they maybe do not want to do. But yeah, that's
Gotcha.
basically what it is about.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So, now that we have a better understanding of what the story is about, we can go over the feedback part of the story. So normally what we like to do is we like to start with the what's working, what part's working, and then we jump into the what could be improved part of the story. And then touch on some of the other elements if it's required. Sometimes it may not be. We'll just kind of feel it out and see where we are by the end. So first things first, we'll go into what's working. Jaylon, would you want to start us off, or do you want me to start us off?
I can go for it.
Okay.
I do want to start by saying Sunny left us a note on the beginning. We read the first 10K words, and she left us a note and said how English is not her first language, and she is writing in a language that is not her first language. So I just want to take a moment to really acknowledge and honor you for that, because that is incredible. English is a rough language to write in for people who are native speakers. So I want to very much applaud you for choosing to do something that is so hard, and telling a story that's so important. So that leads me to the very first thing that I will say really hit me was your theme and the core emotional truth of the story. I think it shone through so well from the very beginning, and it was something that I connected with because my younger self needed to hear these things too, that you have agency and power to tell your own story and to choose how your own story is going to go. And you don't need to be trapped under someone else's expectations for your future. So I really appreciated your theme. I really appreciated the truths that you're sharing in this story. I think that a lot of people are going to relate to it because, especially with the age group that you're targeting, your demographic, it's a very key moment in our lives where we are forced with a choice of what are you going to do for the rest of your life. And that's a heavy question, especially to be asking, in the grand scheme of things, young kids. So I really applaud you for choosing to write a story that is so necessary. And I especially loved your world building because there was a lot of natural things that came up. So when you were sharing the world that existed and the way that things worked, I never felt like something was info dumping. I always felt like it was just presented as a very natural, this is the way things are. But I also fully understood it. So the way that you chose to reveal information about how the world worked was very smooth, very natural. I really loved that. So very good job there. I will also say, so this is kind of very specific, and I'm not sure if you did this on purpose, but in I think it was the first chapter, the main character was tying her shoes, and then she thinks about being in the shoes of a teacher. And immediately it stuck out to me because I was thinking that's exactly how our train of thought works in real life. You see something, or you do something, or you smell something, something triggers your senses, and then you start thinking about that. So I really thought that was a great moment because you showed that natural train of thought, and in a way, it was a natural metaphor that emerged because it was an action your character was doing that connected to a deeper thought that was very key to the story. So, very good job there. Yeah, that's what I got for now, but I'm probably also going to find more things as the discussion goes on. But I will turn it over to Jared.
So I took notes as far as I do this all the time. Every time because I have a horrible memory, so I always take the notes. It's easier for me.
Oh, I took notes too. So.
Yeah. Well,
it's the reading off the notes that I struggle with.
So for me, I thought that there was an emotional core that felt really real. So Izzy's relationship with her parents, it felt really relatable to me. There's this push and pull of like they love me but they never hear me type of thing that I think every single teenager has gone through in their life. I know I did. I still do, and I'm 37. And so my mom still doesn't hear a word I say. But it's fine. I think that's a natural thing of being humans, and being parents and kids, and it's the natural order of things. And I think that it was really well done in the presenting of that. I think the way that her mom talks over her dreams while still calling her sweetie is honestly a really observed thing. It's so passive aggressive that it's that it's perfect. It is complete and utter mom talk. Moms do passive aggressiveness better than anybody else, at least in my experience with moms, both mine and my friends' moms. It has always been passive aggressiveness is really fantastic. It's an art form. So
Mom's
I I feel like Izzy's mom is peak, as we say, peak mom in the story.
That's actually funny because I feel like in every book that I'm currently working on where the parent has a mother, every mother calls their child sweetie, and I have to find a different way to do it because I can't do that in every single book.
Well, this one, it works. I think that this one actually worked for what you were trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I think it's sweetie here. I think that makes sense. Also, it's British. So it sounds cooler.
Yeah. So the friend group I also liked. I thought the friend group charm there was a friend group charm that was there. There's a warmth between Izzy and her friends that really shines through. There's softness and there's love and comfort within their interactions, from the hair braiding to the shared playlists. Mika especially stands out as having a more distinct voice and energy out of all of the characters that I read. And I always try to be on the lookout for characters that stand out, because sometimes, not always, and I know a lot of writers hate hearing this, but sometimes the character that stands out the most in your draft is actually the main character. You just don't know it yet.
Oh, Jared, you're mixing things up too much.
I'm so sorry. But it's a thing that I've realized it in my own writing, where I'll read back something and I knew in my mind who the protagonist was going to be, and then I realized, oh, I really love this character over here, and they're just like kicking ass this whole way through. It's like, oh, that's why, because it's their story and they were just trying to get me to focus on them a little bit. Not to say that that's necessarily what the case is in this particular situation, but be open to the possibility of something like that.
Short stories from other characters. So, like, short story collection with other perspectives. I might do that.
The last thing I would say is, and this kind of lines up with Jaylon's comment about the world itself. The world of career-determining internships with controlled food, ration milk, and state-guided futures. It's a great foundation for a quiet dystopia, which is something we don't often get as much I I am slowly but surely coming around to loving dystopia and dystopian fiction. So I'm always interested in different different takes on it because we're so used to seeing the loud, dark, violent dystopia. To see something that's a little more subtle, a little quieter, it kind of reminds me of The Giver a little bit, where it's a little bit more of a subtle, quiet dystopian world, but it still works. And so it's functional and familiar. It feels like a real place. It feels like a place that could realistically exist. And I really do like that. I will say for the listeners who we did say that this is kind of a social sci-fi. Now, me personally, I had to look up social sci-fi because I had never heard of the term itself. But for the listeners, examples of social sci-fi, just so they have a feel of what it is, are things like Brave New World, 1984, even technically Hunger Games, even though it's a little bit more um, a little more violent than something like this, or Fahrenheit 451. These are examples of social sci-fi. They're more soft sci-fi. It's less focused on the all the space opera and hubbub that is sci-fi. So just for people, I don't know if anybody else was like, I don't know what that is. So just in case, I wanted to set the table for that. But overall, that's what's working. I think you did a great job with that. And I think you should definitely lean in to more of those things. And then we can go into what needs a little bit of work. Keeping in mind, we did keep in mind that the note that you left at the end of the draft about what you wanted to focus on. And so we skewered our feedback to that specifically as opposed to anything outside of that. So, okay, Jaylon.
And that being that this is your zero draft, so you're going to go back and fix pacing, but you're just focusing on the plot now, correct?
The what, not the how. That's the way I can explain that. The what, not the how.
Gotcha. Perfect.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I'll start with jumping off of something that I really loved, which was your world building. Going into kind of jumping off that and going into the setting, I will agree with what Jared said that the world building made it feel like a real place to me, to the point where halfway through the snippet that we got, I forgot that it was a made up world, and I was trying to figure out what culture you were writing in. So I was like thinking, is it an Asian culture maybe? Is it a European culture? So I think that and then I read that you mentioned the view outside of Isabel's window where she saw Big Ben and the Thames. And I started thinking, I kind of wish I had this picture sooner. So I had a better vision in my head that the setting was an actual, like, the globe is still how we know it, even though it's in a world where there are several other globes. So having an idea of the setting specifically, the town that she's living in, the country she's living in, something like that, a little bit sooner, I think would have made it click better in my brain. And one idea I had, where in the first chapter, you had the clock chiming 7 o'clock, and I was thinking it would have been a perfect place to mention it right there, because you already put it in so smoothly. If you just change where it is, slip in that little detail a little bit sooner, and that would be amazing. So
that's cool, not going back and editing thing. That's okay. I could mention the view now, but I'm not gonna go back and edit, because if I go back now, I'm not gonna be done by any time.
Yes. No, that is the way to go. And for anyone listening, that is the way to write. Do not go back and try and edit and make your first draft perfect, or your zero draft. Like, you're just focused on getting the words out. As Sunny said before, it's what, not the how. So, and another thing, this is kind of, again, talking about the first chapter, I don't, as it stands right now, I don't think you need a prologue. I think that the prologue read as a first chapter, because there wasn't, usually prologues are for when you have a drastic change in either time frame or perspective, or you're going back in time or forward in time, or you're writing in a different tense, or you're writing from a different character's point of view, or you're writing from a different setting. So I think that in this case, you may not need a prologue, since your prologue is kind of just your first chapter. That's a really small thing, but it kind of stood out to me as just something that you could maybe keep in mind if you find it helpful. And this is kind of going off of what you said you struggled with as far as, finding a way to show instead of tell. And I really like that we get to talk about this, because as Jared said, I feel like it's the golden rule that everyone will repeat, but they won't tell you what they actually mean by it. And sometimes it's repeated too much as kind of like something that you can hide behind as, well, this is the problem because you're telling, not showing. But then they don't explain how you can fix it. So I think that it's super fun that we get to actually talk about this and talk about, as writers ourselves, how we have practically done this, as opposed to just being editors who tell you, this is how you should do it. But I think subtext is really key. So Jared wrote a helpful article about subtext that helped me be able to put words to what I've had in my head to kind of explain what it is, because it's such an all-encompassing term. But subtext is basically what a character will say but not say. So very unfortunately in life, no one ever says exactly what they mean. And especially when you have such taboo or sensitive issues as, accidental homophobia, or parents trying to dictate your future, or, those kinds of tensions. There's a lot more that's said when you're afraid to say something. There's a lot more that's said through body language, how a person will stand, what their mouth might do when they're trying to like hold back words. So like if they, I know this is used a lot, but like if they'll purse their lips, or they'll, kind of cringe a little, those kinds of hints will show you that someone's not saying everything that they mean. And it's effective when you write stories this way, because sometimes it can be boring to read about conversations that we've heard in our lives every day. So, the characters wake up and one character might say, "Good morning." And the other character says, "Good morning. How are you? Did you sleep well last night? What do you want to make for breakfast?" Like, all these things are conversations that we have in our lives every day. So sometimes readers will get bored if they're reading them in a book about an adventure or a story that they want to be immersed in. So one idea is, well, okay, let me go back. As writers, we have to find a way to somehow make your world feel real, make your characters feel like everyday people that your readers might know or interact with, but also cut out the parts that slow down the pacing. And I know that you said, that's going to be a rewriting a second draft thing, so don't worry about it yet. But just context for what I was going to say about subtext is focusing on showing tone or body language instead of having a character say everything that they're thinking, or say everything that they know another character is thinking. So that's a long way of saying a very simple thing of I would love to see more subtext, because I feel like it could really add more tension to your world and the conversations that your characters have.
Before we do that, can I add something to that?
Yes.
Just because when I say my part, I know I don't want to have to go all the way back when I could have just said it right here, but in line, it's in line with what you're saying as well. Is I agree with you so much in that, and in the space of like people, someone who's unable to sort of picture it in their mind what they want to do or how they want to do it, and just kind of have that I want to just tell you what's going on mentality. I think a really cool technique you can use. I use it a lot of times when trying to do subtext is when it comes to dialogue is I always think about if I had to say this line to a person and I didn't want to say this, but I still wanted to get the point across, what would I say? Or how would I move my body? Or how would I look at them? What would my facial expressions be? And just turn it on myself. And then whatever the answer to that question is, write that for the character. That's a great start. It gets a little bit easier if you come up with, if you do more like, I don't know if you do character interviews or if you really get to know your characters before you write them. Some people do, some people don't. No right or wrong answer there. But the more you know your characters, the more you're able to say, it becomes less about how you would do it, and then it becomes, well, how would they avoid this saying this? I want to break up with you, for instance, is a line. You can easily just say, I want to break up with you. Sure. But for a character who's a little bit more mousy or who is known to not always speak up when they need to, I want to break up with you sounds completely different. I want to break up with you can be something as simple as, what would it be like if we weren't together? That's a question they could ask. Now it's a completely different way of doing it. And it's a whole lot more subtext than just, I don't want to be with you anymore. So kind of thinking out about it from that perspective is a really cool way to kind of punch that show don't tell rule in the face and still kind of land it. So just something to think about. Sorry, Jalen, I just
No, that's
wanted to get
great.
a thought on it.
Because you brought me back to a practical thing I was thinking of, which was acting your scenes out in the mirror is 100% acceptable. Because
For sure.
I think that's honestly how I started telling stories. And I think that that's the best way of being able to actually find out what it looks like. Because, as you were saying, Sunny, sometimes you can't just figure it all out through imagination. Some people are really gifted in imagination, some of us aren't. And our power is more in just saying it as it needs to be said. You just have to find different ways of finding out what needs to be said. So I hope that that's helpful in not just us being like, show, don't tell, but maybe
we're not waving our finger at you about the whole thing.
Giving some practical tips. Okay. One more thing I thought of, and this is again the more of the what, not the how. It kind of seemed to me, and this is from my experience, so it might not be the story that you need to tell. It might not be a story that resonates with you. From my experience, it kind of felt like challenges seemed a little bit too easy to overcome in these first chapters. So, for example, when they were apartment hunting and being able to, buy stuff for their apartment and have the means to do so, and they can just automatically find an apartment that's perfect for them, or it seemed automatically. And in my brain, I was reading it and I was saying, this feels way too easy from what I struggled with when I was trying to move out of my parents' house so that I could start writing my own story and living my own life. It felt a lot more challenging than this seems when I'm reading about it. And then I saw a comment that the real estate lady made. She said, here we go, apartment, after the 10th apartment, And I started thinking, what if, because I know myself, what if she made a passive-aggressive comment like that a little bit earlier when they were first opening up this apartment? When she was unlocking the door, she's like, here we go, apartment 10 of the day. And I know for myself, I would almost feel that anxiety and that pressure of, I need to just say yes to this one, even if it's not the perfect situation for me. And I started thinking I would really like to read a story about a character like Isabel who ends up in a situation that isn't the best for her because she felt pressured into making that choice so that she could live her own story and, take that next step forward in her life. So I don't know, that's a random idea I'm throwing out. But but it kind of goes along with making sure that the key moment in your story where your character is pushed into action, having to go on their personal journey, needs to happen soon enough that you hook a reader. So let's call it your catalyst or your point of no return. But within these first few chapters, something should happen where Isabel realizes or is forced to make a decision or take a step that propels her along this journey of learning how to be herself, learning how to make these choices for herself, and learning what she wants her future to look like. And it has to be something that is important and tense and meaningful enough that she can't not finish going down this journey throughout her story. And that's going to keep your readers hooked. So make sure that your catalyst or your point of no return is identified and happens early enough that your readers don't feel like they're just reading in order to see your character wake up the next morning. They're reading because your character is stuck in the middle of a journey that they need to finish in order to learn the lesson that they need to in order to survive. So that's what I've got for now. I don't know if any of that was helpful, but hopefully we went down the right trail of giving you actually helpful feedback.
I like a lot of what Jaylon said. I agree with what Jaylon said, and great ideas as well. So from my perspective, couple of things, and this is something I think we need to do. This is more for Jaylon than you, but I think we need to do going forward is I always mean to kind of preface our show with this statement, but I don't remember it until we're halfway through the show. But like the realization that everything that we say is subjective. It's 9 times out of 10 it is purely about personal taste and personal thing, and that's just writing in general. There's no right or wrong in writing. There's no objectively bad writing or anything like that, at least in my opinion. And so I just want to say that to you from that perspective. Before I jump into the what's working, what's not working aspect of things, the thing that I mentioned this to Jaylon a little bit ago is that to me this felt very much like slice of life, like a slice of life anime. That where it's like the story is here and people are doing things, but it's just more kind of just watching people live. Than it is like, oh, this is like a story where we're focusing on some sort of plot that's about to happen or something, you know. So that is what it felt like to me. And while I don't necessarily have a problem with that kind of story, I'm more of a visual person. So I like slice of life in like on a movie or a TV show. In a book, I'm very, very impatient when it comes to reading. You have to grab me and smack me in the face a lot and let me know like this is the story I need to read. So I say all that to sort of set the pace of where I'm coming from. So to me, it felt like there was no urgency, at least not in the part that I had read. And or like from the sample that we got. No, there was no central conflict that really stuck out to me as like, oh, this is, you know, there's no major antagonist. There's nothing going on that's like, oh, this is gonna be our protagonist that Izzy's gonna have to overcome in some way, whether it be Izzy versus the society itself, the school system itself, if she's gonna be, you know, pulling in. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Aaron Brockovich. But like, I'm sure. Well, Aaron Brockovich, it's a fantastic movie about a woman who goes up against you know, lawyers and big company, but she's going up against the system. And so, you know, I didn't know if like at first I was like, oh, is that what this is gonna be? Is this gonna be the thing where like Isabel's gonna like realize that like she's gonna have to stand up for what she really wants and go up against the system that kind of puts people in a little box and keeps them there, which is kind of cool. And if that's where we're going, awesome. I would just like to see it a little bit sooner, or some not the whole enchilada, but at least some snippets of it earlier. That the story, like I said, the story it's pleasant, but it is conflict free. Or I wouldn't say conflict free. I guess it's more conflict light is what it feels like to me. Izzy has opinions. but there is no serious obstacles pushing back against her. There's no real tension. Besides her parents, basically letting her know, and pretty much all the adults in her life letting her know that, like, you have to pick something, you have to do something. There's no real, at any point, Izzy could just be like, screw this, I'm not going to do it. I don't care what any of you guys say. At least that's how it felt. It felt like that's what Izzy could do at any time, and that made it feel like there was no real tension or danger for her to deal with. Knowing that readers need that level of friction, it doesn't necessarily have to be a dramatic thing, but it has to create some level of momentum, because even in a slice of life, there has to be a central question or threat that makes us wonder what's going to happen next. My suggestion, I did write down suggestions. None of these you have to take, but these are just things that popped into my mind. Let Izzy break a rule or hide some kind of secret would be interesting. Introduce a moment that threatens her future plans. What if she fails at her first internship? What if a friend is selected for something that she actually wanted, and so now they've got beef? Give her a defining desire that she's afraid to say out loud. So maybe maybe she wants love. Maybe she wants. I wouldn't do love, because I feel like that's so it's typical in dystopian fiction. But maybe she wants something else, something like rebellion. Maybe she just wants to be free. Whatever it is. Maybe she doesn't want to go to school at all, and she just kind of wants to be like a surfer girl or something, just like, I don't have to do anything. But
Here's
that,
sorry,
yeah.
I'm interrupting, but
No, it's okay.
another idea. What if she just didn't tell her parents that she didn't want to be a teacher? What if she was keeping up this double life of acting like she wanted to be a teacher, but her friends are the only ones who know that she's actually looking at other internships? Because that would add a really interesting conflict where there's stakes. So I think this is what we're saying. You have to present the question to your readers: what's going to happen? How terrible are things going to be for Izzy if she doesn't learn the things she needs to learn and find the courage that she needs to find? So
Exactly.
That's another idea thrown out there, as you are.
Yeah, I like that. I do like that idea. Again, this is your story, Sonny, so don't feel like we're like co-opting it to rewrite it for you. But I do think that's a cool idea, whether it's that or it's like something like it, or even if she's pretending to. I don't know. I don't know the strictness of the rule societies, and how easy or hard it would be for her to like even pretend she's going to school when she's not, and she's off exploring other possibilities of this world, that what it could be. What does it look like when a person doesn't go to school? What happens then? Are they shunned in society? This is more of a world building question than it is a plot question, but like, are they shunned in society? Has there ever been anyone who just didn't do it? Who was just like, who opted out of school and decided to do a different thing? And if that's the case, you even have that creates opportunities for like there to be like, oh, there's this mysterious thing of like, what, you could be the next person who does that. But even in all of those scenarios, all the suggested scenarios, it creates a level of question of what's next and what could happen. What kind of consequences might be there. The second thing was plot momentum, and this is a little bit more in line with pacing, so it's less relevant, but it just stands to mention for the sake of character. There is a lot of repeated conversations where it feels like I was reading it and I was like, okay, I got this. This makes sense to me. I got it. Okay, let's move on. And then it comes up again in a different way with different people, but it's generally the same information. Everything that a reader reads in a story. The thing that I struggle with realizing, but I'm getting it, and I want other writers to get too, is that everything that you write is in essence speaking to the reader. And so even when it's first person, even when it's, and it seems like the protagonist is telling a story about what's happening in their life. Oh, I was fighting the masked swordman, or I was doing whatever. Even though it feels like it's them just telling what happened, they're really having a conversation with the reader. And when you're having a conversation, I'm sure we've all been there, where someone's telling you something and they just keep on saying the same thing, but just different ways. And you're just like, okay, I got it. Cool. Let's move on. So when you're writing it, write like that. Remember that if you've already told the audience something, they don't need to know it again.
If I tell someone something, so I say it over and over again, and then they're like, "You already told me this." It does happen on a regular basis.
Same though.
So I mean, that would be that. I also agree with the prologue not necessarily being needed, or the prologue itself can become the chapter one.
Yeah.
However, I would think that the inciting moment of like launch day, I think starting out your chapter one at launch day might be more interesting. I'm a big believer in throwing us in the middle of the action. The first day of school, or the first day at academy, or even as far in as getting specific assignments, or her actually taking, depending on which story you choose. Let's say you did go the route of she's lying to her parents about wanting to be a teacher and saying she's going to do that, but she does something different. Start off with her getting her assignment, her picking the assignment that is the absolute opposite, and then reveal later on that she's been, when we finally meet her parents, we're like, oh, wait a minute, she's actually lying about what she's been doing this whole time, because this whole day we followed her doing this one thing, and then it turns out she was actually supposed to be doing this other thing. And now you've created a level of like, ooh, what happens when her parents find out? Oh, that's going to be a big blowout that we're gonna get to see. And depending on what her parents are like, I don't know, they may not be the blowout type, but like, they may smack her on the hand. I don't know.
I want them to have a redemption arc, or to have the possibility of a redemption arc. Let's go with that. I want them to be fully awful.
Okay, fair enough.
Because they're still just loving parents. They don't do it because they hate their child. They do it because they want what they think is the best option for them.
Right.
Which I do think is a really important thing to keep in there, because that's so much more often the case, where is someone who is acting as an antagonist for you finding your own story in life is actually just trying to do what's best for you out of genuine love.
Right. And that's for the listeners, and other writers out there. That's also something to keep in mind too. I think a lot of times we think antagonist, and we think antagonist, so we think bad guy. So we think they're a villain who's trying to do horrible things. But a lot of times the villain in real life, is just a person who works against the thing that you want, and they may not even be a bad person at all. They may be a great person, in fact. But they're it's all about the opposition of whatever it is you want. So, yeah, that would be what I would say. The third thing I would say is that world building, while I did love the world, it feels more, I disagree with Jaylon in the sense of the info dumpiness of it all. To me, it felt more told than lived in. So it kind of felt like an instruction manual of how to live in this place, as opposed to, Izzy actually lives here and she has actual thoughts and feelings about this place, and there are people who hold this space. And so I felt like a lot of the info was kind of delivered directly through dialogue or narration, which we talked about, rations, powders, internships, etc. But it's not deep. It's not super baked into the characters' daily frustrations or emotional lives. If the powders have specific effects on the body, we can see how it affects her, or if it doesn't, or like maybe it's supposed to work a certain way, but for her for some reason it just doesn't, and she can't figure out why. Like those are little things that make us feel like, oh, this is an everyday thing for her that she's trying to figure out, without it being like, just telling us that it's the case. Some suggestions for helping this along, I think, let us feel that the system affects the kids. Do they trade food rations? Do they make jokes about the black market coffee? Do they feel resentful over how the future paths are supposed to be planned out for them? Let us know what these guys are feeling and thinking, beyond them just being like, I don't like this, or this is this, or there's that. The other thing, this kind of falls back into more dialogue, and repeating stuff. There's a thing that happens. This is less about repeating and more about stuff that other characters should already know. So there's a couple of times in there I read, don't forget that this. um, or it's some variation of that, which is the equivalent of saying. I always laugh with the other host who's not here, Charles, but we always make this joke about the movie I think it's Big Hero 6 or something, where the character is talking to his brother, and when he's talking to his brother, he tells him he's saying something about their parents dying, and he's like, "I lost all of that when our parents died, remember?" And we always laugh because it's a funny thing that two people having a conversation who've already communicated wouldn't need to remind the other of something that they already know. And so what I would say is for the whole don't forget this or reminding each other, when you have two characters or three characters or however many characters having a conversation and they are friends or they've been around each other or they've interacted with each other before that moment. If you have to say don't forget, that means that they already technically knew. And so if they already knew, they don't need to be told. There are other ways to put that in to dialogue, whether it be actual dialogue, or internal stuff. So, Isabella knew yada 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 yada. That's a way that we can reveal that information that the audience doesn't know, but you don't have these characters, and so the person doesn't stop reading and being like, why are they reminding them of that? Because that was something that happened to me, and I don't want that to be a thing that happens. The other thing is use details to differentiate this world. So why is weather artificial? What's the mood of the city? Are there cameras? Is there a rebellion that's going on that nobody knows about, or very few people know about? Has there been a recent terrorist attack? All kinds of stuff.
I love that you still think it's a dystopian.
Yeah.
No terrorists.
So we'll see that. There you go. So I mean, in this particular case, this may even be more utopian than it is dystopian. So these are just examples, but in general,
Terrence over here. Terrence
I'm losing my
is
mind.
like we can't have peace and quiet. We must.
No,
have
yeah, I know. It's my fault. I'm a dark soul. I always have to have the worst things happening to everyone everywhere all the time. But
this is personal taste in writings.
for sure, because I don't know what a peaceful world looks like. I wake up and choose violence all the time. So, but yeah. So ultimately, though, the idea, whether it be something crazy and violent like my side of the spectrum, or something a little bit more peaceful and calm, of I don't know, a festival that goes on every whatever. I guess, well, you're from Germany, so traditionally it may be a little bit different as to what you guys celebrate versus we celebrate. But here we have Thanksgiving, for instance. So something like that, is that a thing that happens here? And if so, how do they feel about it? How does that play into, is that a thing that's coming up? And how is the rest of the world interacting around that? Make me feel like it's a place that exists, that when I open your book and I'm reading it, I'm leaving wherever I'm at to go to where you are, or the world that you've created for me. So that's what I would do as far as that goes. The other thing is characters. Characters, to me, they lacked. While I did like like I said, I did like Mika for sure. The characters, the rest of them kind of lacked distinct voices. So many of the characters to me felt like they had the same tone. They were all polite and explanatory and good-hearted. But there were times where so when I read, usually sometimes because of my also ADHD, I have ADHD, and so for me, I have to listen to and read at the same time. So when I was putting on the voice to read the document while I was reading it, there were times where I would stop and listen, but still be doing it. But then I would get lost with who was talking and why, and I couldn't figure out what was going on, and that was something that kind of took me out of it. So I had to go back to my computer and then go back and read, okay, that's who was talking, got it. And I feel like the voices have to be distinct. Everybody needs to be able to, I should be able to listen to the story and know exactly who's saying what, whether it just be a slight change in the way that they pronounce words, whether it be the kind of vocabulary they use. Mika herself is already a standout character. Use that as a template. Give each character a flavor with their dialogue. One that interrupts, one that overthinks, one that rarely speaks, one that always jokes. Something. That's very basic, but it's a good place to start. And then let the conflict exist within the friend group as well. I think that would also be interesting because I don't have. I mean, I have friends. Well, that was going to sound really sad. I have friends, but like, and I don't have friends the way that I did when I was younger. But when I had friends when I was younger, none of us were ever um, agreeable all the time. Anyway, we didn't like just sit there and talk. We weren't polite. I mean, we were also guys, and so generally speaking, we're not very polite to each other anyway. Um, but overall, we were, we still had disagreements. There were rivalries between us. Sometimes one of, even if it was friendly rivalries. You have one that was like you have a friend that's really competitive, and you have another one that's also competitive. So they're always trying to one up each other, even just playfully. Or you have one that's really really quiet, and everybody's always trying to get that one to talk. Like those little moments of conflict within the group that isn't necessarily high stakes, but still lets us know, oh, these are real people who have real feelings and real thoughts. So I think that would be it as far as that goes. And then the last thing that actually, I'm not even gonna say that one because again, that one falls more under pacing ish. So Okay, so I would say some of the scenes could definitely have been trimmed and more focused. I felt like some of the chapters lingered a little too long on like logistics or errands, so like moving apartments or buying decor, planning schedules, things like that. It all just felt like cool, this is the thing that happens, but we didn't need to spend so much time there doing it without it raising the stakes. So if we're gonna spend time, moving apartments, it could be, whether it be a thing of like somebody else is also trying to get this apartment, so we're trying to figure out how we're gonna get in there before them, or there could be a level of like maybe a parent is upset about you moving out and doesn't want you to be in that particular apartment, so there's a little bit of conflict in that. Passive aggressive moms who are just like, it's really nice, honey, or really nice, sweetie, but we know deep down inside she absolutely hates this place. That kind of thing. But just trimming the setup, starting it as the old expression goes, come in late, leave early, a little bit more. That would be really, really great. And then just kind of ask yourself what changes in the scene, what decisions have been made, and what emotions have been deepened. If you do that with every single scene, they're gonna get way better, especially if you're able to answer them. And if the answer to them is like, oh, nothing, then you got some more work to do in the scene. But overall, that was things that stood out to me the most. I would say for the next draft, the things that I would touch on, and you probably already have a lot of these in your own like mind as to what you want to do, but I would introduce the conflict, just to summarize, introduce conflict early, with the stakes and tension, maybe mystery, whatever you want to throw in there. Deepen the world via emotion, show how it affects the daily life, not just what happens. And then sharpen character distinction, as we talked about, and then just make sure every scene moves things forward, whether it be a character, the plot, or the theme itself. Each scene should shift one of those three things. But yeah, those are my thoughts as far as all of that goes. Shaylon, did you have anything to add to that?
I will add, talking about putting purpose behind each scene and weeding out, because that's something that happens a lot in rewrites, is you spend all this time and emotion writing something, and this paragraph had a sentence in it that you really loved, and then you have to trim it, and it really sucks. So I sympathize with that part of the writing process, because it's not fun, even though it's necessary. But one of the ways practically to show how you can answer the question of, does this scene serve a purpose? For example, when they were meeting for book club at her friend's house, and Izzy got there early and started reading her book. One example for deciding whether it should say or not is make sure that her reading the book connects to something later, in the sense of, does her reading the book while she's waiting for her friend to show up kind of hint at she is often left out and ditched by her friends, and so she needs to entertain herself while she's waiting for them to decide to show up? Does it show, for example, character, she's always showing up early places. We were kind of talking about this before the podcast, but that anxiety of like always showing up early because you don't want to be late, that would be necessary because you're showing character, you're cracking open how this character lives their lives because of the ways that they feel. Or another example is, does something that she's reading in the book connect with something that happens later? So there's a practical example of how to ask the question of, is this scene necessary? Does it connect to something bigger down the line?
Some of them, to be fair, some scenes I just tried to add more because I wanted to at least have the 1,000 word per chapter thing. So some scenes were like, I feel like this could be cut out, but that's because I at least wanted to have the 1K chapter length, at least for the zero draft, to at least have an idea what should happen in this chapter. Have at least an idea, and the pacing is going to change, and the chapters are going to be longer, so that also will change the pacing, because hopefully a chapter will be around 2,500 words, which is a bit of a difference to the 1K. So yeah, it was more of a, okay, now I have to fill it with words.
Yeah. No, that's definitely something, that is exactly where you should be in this stage of drafting. So you're doing everything right for this stage of drafting. Don't even worry about all the finer stuff until you get into those next rounds of rewrites, because again, it's a rough process, but it's a necessary process. It's all part of the writing. So I believe you can do it. You've done an amazing job with the part of the drafting where it's just you word vomit, you get as many words onto the page as you can, and now you have something to work with to beat up into a draft that is polished and ready to put out.
It's fun though, because I've actually reached the point in the story where I'm having a lot of fun. And I don't want to spoil it, but it's also really hard to talk about it without spoiling. Which is feeling some other emotions towards other people, and it's extremely hard and fun at the same time to write someone having a crush on someone.
Yes, yes, it is.
Ooh.
And it's weird because we've all experienced it, but it's really hard to like put it into words without it feeling like, oh, this sounds so cheesy, or this sounds whatever. Maybe it sounds cheesy because having a crush on someone is kind of cheesy.
I was gonna say, that's just being real.
I have never been to that point. I've never had, I don't think I've actually really ever had a crush on someone. But it was so fun to write that I kept sending a screenshot to a friend, and they were like, "This is so relatable." I'm like, "Well, good for you."
That is a truly gifted writer right there.
So the last bit of notes that I had were more like final thoughts that again I wrote down because it's easier. But you clearly care deeply about your characters, your world. That warmth shows. What you're building has heart. It has soul. And there's a seed of something that's deep in this. Right now, though, I feel like the story is more of a vibe but it needs a pulse. And so I think that the questions we want to ask is, what does Izzy want that she's afraid to admit? Who or what might get in the way of that, and what does she stand to lose if they did get in the way of that? And then once you tighten up the plot and raise the stakes a bit, this soft core dystopia will come to life, not just as a setting, but also as like a real possible
utopia,
boiling pot of
for
a growth
in utopia. That's a thing
for sure. Exactly. But I believe we here at 1 Billion Arc, we believe in the bones of the story, and we just need to get it moving. But I think you did a great job. This was a great outing. I also want to applaud you for having the courage to share your work. Not everybody does. So I appreciate you showing up, sharing your words, your feelings, your thoughts. I, as a writer myself, know what it is like to put your heart and soul on the page and then give it to somebody else to tell you what they think about it. But you were brave, and you showed up, and you took it, and you engaged, and that puts you head and shoulders above a bunch of other writers. So fantastic work as far as that goes.
And thank you.
For sure. The last thing I would say is if you can get an answer to just one question from us today about your story, what would that be if you had one?
Well, it's not about the story itself, more about writing. Once I'm done, I'm already planning on like putting the story to the side to like once I come back to it, have a fresh pair of eyes. But how long makes it most sense to either work on something else or to not have the story as my like focal point? Because I'm almost done. I'm hopefully going to be done at the end of April, and then I'm going to work on a different story. And the question is like, when is too long and when is too short?
That's a great question.
That is a good question. I will say the answer is going to depend on every individual. So you know yourself best. You know yourself best. You know ultimately when is going to be too long, too short. That is definitely, you go off of vibes. However, a tip that I always found helpful is I feel like the change of season is really helpful for getting a fresh perspective, but also not forgetting what the past season was like. So, for example, if you finish the story in spring, wait until summer or fall to look at it again, because symbolically, the world around you changes, even though not too much time has passed. But the world around you looks different, and so your perspective might look different. So, if that is a fun, helpful thing, you can always, go at it a couple times too and see, like, start reading, pick it up when the season changes, start reading, and then if it still feels too familiar to you and it doesn't feel like you have those fresh set of eyes, then you can put it away and then take it out again, a month or two later. So there's no right or wrong answer. It's really just whatever your process looks like, and you have to find your process through trial and error, unfortunately.
My answer to that question might be a little bit different than hers.
Because we are different people. This is
Yes.
why we have a podcast where we talk as a team about brainstorming
Right.
stories, because you get different perspectives and there are bits of value in each one.
I think so. Just to make sure that I'm answering the question correctly, you want to know what is the appropriate amount of time between when you finish your draft to pick it back up and start hacking it up a little bit. Yeah. Okay. So for me, there's a couple of different ways to do this. There's a method that I use when it comes to writing screenplays, because I write screenplays as well as prose. When writing screenplays, I always do at least a month, no earlier than a month. And that's a pretty hard, fast rule, and that could work well for prose. But for prose, I think another, or maybe an easier way, is when you work on a different story, get to the point where, well, it's better if I ask you this question first. Are you the type of person who gets really, really excited about the story that they're writing and like wants to just dive in on it? Judging by your wall, I will say I would say yes. So what I would do is, like, I'm that kind of person too. I get really excited about a story, and so when I finish it, I'm like, oh, this is so good. This is like the greatest thing I've ever written. It's usually not, but it's like the greatest thing in my mind. It's what I think. And so it's usually because of the excitement that I have for the idea and the project. So I think the greatest rule of thumb is start working on something else, and when you feel yourself at the point where you're so excited about the new thing, then go back and edit it, because you'll finally look at it with the perspective of, your mind will be on that other thing that you're really, really excited about, and so you'll start to see all the problems and the thing that you already worked on, and you'll be like, oh, this is terrible, because it's not going to be as beautiful as the thing that I'm thinking about over there. So that varies, because sometimes the length of time may vary on that, because I've been known to be excited about a project for 6 months, and so it just takes me 6 months before I'm like, because I just love the idea so much that I'm just like, okay, cool. But sometimes it may be a week, and you're just like, okay, I'm really pumped about this new thing, and now I want to try it. So wait until you feel that level of like enthusiasm about something else, and then you won't be as biased about the other thing. So yeah, actual time limit. I know it's kind of a cop. I think me and Jalen both gave you kind of cop out answers of the usual, it depends on you type of thing, but it really does depend on you. Just give yourself a little break.
Yeah.
There's no rules to writing.
You make your own.
Wild West out here.
Never gotten this far. That's why it's like, okay, how do other people use this? Like, what do other people do? Especially because I tend to, when I read something that I've written before, no matter how long afterwards, I read it as what I want to have written, not what I actually wrote.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm dyslexic, so I do not see my mistakes. I need to keep that in mind. So if I return to the story, I need to actually be able to read it as what is on the paper, not what I wanted to have on the paper.
Right.
That's a very good point to make as well, because I feel like that's a struggle that you're not alone in. A lot of people experience that. I've experienced it. I've also experienced what Jared said about, like, I appreciate, Jared, that you added the ADHD answer, because I have OCD, not ADHD, undiagnosed, but still. So I feel like you can feel either you read through wishful eyes, you knew what you wanted to write and so it's there, or you have that horrible, like, oh, why did I ever think this was good? And both bring their own challenges. So writing in general is hard, and for you being able to write with dyslexia, write in a language that is not your native language, like, all these things you are conquering in order to put the story out there. So to me, that alone is proof that the story is very important for the world to see, because it's worth you going through all these challenges to write it and get it out into the world. So another round of applause for you. You're doing amazing.
For sure. And side note about the whole, this is more, I guess, for the listener who is still on the fence about the whole write till you're excited thing. I think it's this is when I had suggested this to another friend of mine. The way that it always makes sense is, like, if you ever dated somebody and you can't get over that person because they're just, in your mind, they're so amazing and they're just so perfect, and then the moment you start liking somebody else, and then all of a sudden you start to realize all the things that are wrong with the person that you were with that before that. That's exactly what it's like with the draft, because when you're writing, you are dating that draft for however long it takes. That's your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, until you're done. You love them and you want to give them the world, and then it's over. You break up when you're done, and then you go off and be with someone else, and maybe you'll come back later to try to make the relationship right. But that was a crazy metaphor that we just went off on there. So, but yeah. So I think that's pretty much all that we have. We're gonna wrap things up. I think you did such a great job, Sunny. Really, really good job with that. And being able to, one of the things I really do like about this podcast is we get to sit down with the writer and talk to the writer and get a better understanding of where the writer was coming from, which always paints what we've read completely different than when we just read it fresh off without ever interacting with the person. So this was awesome. Thank you for sharing with us. For the listeners, if this episode had given you any clarity, and you like some one-on-one feedback, you can always be a guest on Let's Fix Stories as well. You can submit your story at onebrilliantarc.com, or you can use our form that is in the show notes underneath the episode. And we look forward to working with all of you. And as far as Sunny goes, we look forward to seeing where your story ends up and how you're able to pull it all together. I'm excited to see where Izzy's story goes. All right, guys. Well, thank you for listening, and we'll be back next week.